Okay, hopefully you're adjusting to the new situation reasonably well. And you might even remember something about what we were covering before spring break. Specifically, we had started looking at evolution. So I'll do a little bit of review of that, and then we'll move on to more about it. So our basic definition, again, was that it's a change in gene frequencies within a population over time. Change in gene frequencies, okay, some features of the DNA are becoming more common or less common through time. And population, again, that's multiple interacting individuals of a species. This is not just change within one individual, but change in the patterns in the population over time. Okay, well, that seems pretty basic biology. Why is there all the fuss? Well, a lot of the time, people are trying to claim that evolution has particular moral implications, whether they are for it or against it. But in reality, as we talked about back in the beginning of class, science tells us, well, do this, here's what happens, do that, here's what happens, type of thing. Doesn't tell you should, shouldn't, is this good or bad, types of things. How does evolution work? Basic thing, we've got variation between individuals. Mutations, the things we saw in meiosis, the crossing over between corresponding chromosomes, the independent assortment where for one chromosome, the mother's copy could go to this cell, another chromosome, the father's, randomly sorting out type of thing there. Lateral gene transfer, maybe hybridization, maybe virus, or some other process where DNA from one thing gets picked up by another. Epigenetic changes, these tagging of different parts of the DNA to be turned on or off, things of that sort. All of these types of events will generate new genetic information and cause individuals to be different from each other. Over time then, some of these variations may be more successful than others, and the population will have more of them. The genetic frequencies have changed. Sometimes this is due to natural selection. A particular feature has an advantage relative to the environment. Sometimes maybe it's sexual selection, a variation that makes an individual more appealing in finding a mate. Some of these variations may become more or less common just from random factors. For example, just because there's only so many individuals in any one population, just by chance, maybe there aren't quite as many offspring with one feature than another, and over time it ends up dwindling away. Or maybe half the population lived near a big volcano that blew up and killed them. Their DNA wasn't worse than anybody else's, they just were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So many factors can possibly contribute here. Okay, so natural selection, again, this occurs if, one, there's variation between individuals, and of course there is. All you have to do is look around at multiple people, or dogs, or cats, or any other type of living thing. When you look closely, you see that there's variation between them. Also, this variation has to be inheritable. Okay, if you look around at people, you may see some of them that have blue hair or green hair, but that's because they dyed it. That's not something that's inherited. These variations have to be things that actually get passed on from one generation to the next. And if these variations have some effect on the biological fitness, meaning how likely they are to have offspring that will in turn survive and reproduce as well. And yeah, individuals vary. There's a lot of variation that is inherited through the genes, and some of these differences do affect your chances of having offspring on beyond there. We can see this happening, do experiments, observe organisms out in the wild. Now, often natural selection is summarized as survival of the fittest. Catchy phrase, not very accurate. One, fit enough. It is not only the absolute fittest individuals, but any that have good enough to make it through lifespan. Also, what is fittest? That's much more tricky to define than the catchphrase would suggest. What is fittest for one purpose might cause problems for some others. They're generally trade-offs. Also, environments have differences. One place is a little wetter, one place is a little drier, one place is warmer, one place is colder. One place has more of one type of possible food, one has another. One has different predators or diseases. And so all these variations mean that what's the fittest over here and over another spot, often different. So there's no one fittest that could be surviving. Where's the idea come from? Now, there was speculation related to evolution going way back here and there, but the development of the modern idea really goes back to Darwin and independently from him, Alfred Wallace. Darwin, as a naturalist on the HMS Beagle expedition, traveled around the world, saw living things in many parts of the world, and eventually noticed that things were different in different places, and began to think some about why and what might lead to this variety. Wallace went to what's now Indonesia to observe the living things there. And again, he found that you had different types of things living on different islands. There were some places where there was a rather abrupt boundary between the types of things living over in one area versus another. And both of them realized that this variety in living things would make a lot of sense if some ancestral form had gotten to, say, a particular island or continent, whatever. And then once they were there, descendants with variation over time evolved to produce the life forms that we see today. We then started to look at several major categories of evidence supporting the widespread occurrence of evolution as a pattern. We looked at examples from the fossil record, examples from biogeography, the evolution that's been observed to happen by people, and homology, the presence of similar parts in different types of organisms. The last three are ones that we had not yet gotten to. Fossil record, main points there. As people started looking in the late 1600s through the 1700s, they found that there were different types of fossils in different layers. And of course they were able to figure out that something on the bottom had to be there before something else came in on top, so bottom layers had different things, they were older. Also, as they looked more, they found that the older layers had very simple things. The oldest layers that we know fossils from today only have prokaryotes, bacteria, archaea type of things. Gradually, as we go up through layers, we start to see more complex things there as well. Of course, there's still bacteria, but we also start to see some more complex things. Eventually get eukaryotes, and then some of those eukaryotes end up multicellular. Finally get animals, starting with more simple ones, then more complex animals, and likewise more complex plants over time. Also, in the fossil record, we have a lot of intermediate forms, things that don't entirely fit in any one modern major category. They're somewhat in between. Transitional forms of various sorts. Biogeography, where different types of things live. If you travel to different parts of the world, you'll see different types of plants and animals living in these places. And these patterns, we often have a particular group of things that is diverse in one area, but it's not found someplace else. Instead, there's some other type. For example, some of the freshwater snails I study. We've got a group that's found here in the eastern U.S., ranging a little bit into Mexico and Canada. Different group over on the west coast. And those west coast ones, they're a little different from, but related to the ones in Eastern Asia. Russia down through Vietnam. And then there's a different group that's found in South America or down to South Asia. Africa, Madagascar, these places each have their own group of freshwater snails of roughly similar habits and form. So these patterns of different types of things living in different places matches well with what you'd expect evolutionarily if somewhere in the past some type of organism got to a new area, and then over time its descendants change, and we get new types of organisms developing in these different places. Classic example, what's found on islands. For example, you have a number of unique things in the Hawaiian Islands. Seeds, flying animals, things like that end up getting to a remote island. And if they succeed there, then descendants get different things living in these different places. Different continents. Australia, famous for the very different types of things living there. Separate rivers. Freshwater things aren't real good at hopping out, running across the land, and going into another river. So you often have different things there. Different regions of the ocean. For example, we see differences what's in the Caribbean versus across Panama and the Pacific. What types of changes have been observed? Well, some of the most extensive changes have been over the history of time during domestication, as people have grown different plants, kept various types of animals. We've picked the ones that we like the best, generally the ones that produce the most food or fiber or things like that, and grow well, don't run away, those types of things. And we see some pretty big changes. All the varieties of domestic dog that derive ultimately from wolves. Corn does not look a whole lot like the tiny seeds of the ancestral teosinte, things like that. We can also do experiments, say in the lab, pick something like fruit flies or bacteria, viruses, something that will change pretty fast. And we can see new features coming, and depending on what sort of experiment we set up, some of them may be more successful, things of that sort. We can also do experiments out in the wild. For example, putting fish into a pond where they didn't live before and seeing what sorts of changes are found in those fish. We can also see what happens naturally. Say if there's a change, different weather, and measure organisms and see if we see changes in the patterns over time. homology. Organisms have differences, but also similarities. And taking a look at these, some similarities are, well, yeah, they need to have that. So for example, we have legs, insects have legs. Oh yeah, both of us walk. Hard to do that with no legs. So we have similarities that relate to function, how different things live. Evolutionarily, you'd expect things doing same sort of stuff to conversely evolve similar features because they work. Useful for them. But then we see a number of similarities that don't have obvious necessity in their function. For example, whales and humans have very different life habits. They're permanently in the water, swimming around. We run around on land. Yeah, we can swim, but we're not living all the time in the water. But when you look at the bones making up our arms versus whale flippers, it's the same bones. They're noticeably different shapes, but it's the same bones. Oh, there's no particular reason for that. You can have several different arrangements of bones that would work to build an arm or a flipper. And so that is a homology, an example of similarity due to shared ancestry, not due to functional need. Okay, so that is what we had covered about evolution before the break.